Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit roast number 24. I think it is, right, Mel?
Yes, Rose 24.
24. So we were talking about this roast earlier when we were preparing, and you described it as classic roast territory. So there's nothing particularly in common between any of the profiles that we're talking about today, but all of them have got strengths and weaknesses of their own merits. And I'm looking forward to diving right into them. We have a finance bro from Nigeria. We have a Teach for Nepal fellow. We have a strategy and analytics director who's had a whole bunch of promotions. I think 3 promotions in 3 years. That's going to be cool to talk about. And the bonus question is we have somebody who has a really difficult decision between their dream role and their dream city. And there's a whole family component to it. So looking forward to getting stuck into that. Shall we do the first profile?
Yes, we shall. This is our finance bro from Nigeria. Let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Profile overview, really quick. Demographics, African male, 28 years old, bachelor's degree from a Nigerian university. CFA charter holder as well. The GPA is 3.4. Test score, GRE 320, Quant 162, Verbal 158. That's the split. Professional experience, 5 years at a Big Four in audit and advisory. Currently, he's working at a real estate finance company where he's gaining experience in infrastructure and asset-based financing. Extracurriculars. Founded a U16 football club focused on youth empowerment, mentorship. Also founded a charitable book club and donates the proceeds to local causes. Actively involved in other outreach and social impact projects. Post MBA goals, short term, infrastructure focused investment banking, ideally at a global bank. Long term, infrastructure finance firm focused on addressing development challenges in Africa. What do you think?
Yeah, okay, lots to get into. Let's talk about it first from an academic perspective. We'll do an overall profile evaluation. So that GPA, yeah, look, it's not bad. Average for M7s is about 3.6 out of 4. So 3.4 is a little bit below, but it's still within the right ballpark. The 320 GRE, that's weak. That's weak, and that's going to be really undermining OP for M7s in particular. Demographic, African male. We can assume that he is Nigerian from the undergrad. So that is relatively. I mean, African applicants are very underrepresented within that bucket. Nigerian slightly more so, but still definitely an underrepresented applicant. From a professional standpoint, look, the CFA charter holder is going to do some will help outweigh that. For example, some of the weaker academics certainly sets OP up as a strong contender, as a strong applicant within the finance space. The 5 years of experience at Big Four, I'm seeing that as quite hardcore training. Particularly, OP's accounting is going to be really solid, etc. And that sets up this slightly more sexy experience at a real estate finance company, getting experience in asset-backed financing. So basically, from a professional standpoint, strong.
Yeah.
In terms of extracurriculars, it's hard to know exactly how impactful these are, but it looks like there's quite a lot there. So I don't think OP is going to struggle for stories when it comes to leadership and extracurriculars, etc. And then in terms of goals, look, these are very, very finance focused goals, which I think is strong. I think there's going to be nuance in terms of how to play this. We can talk about this in a little bit more depth. But basically, infrastructure financed investment banking is going to be very, very competitive after the MBA. So we need to make sure OP has got his own angle on that, and we can talk about how to make that angle. So overall, a pretty strong profile. Mediocre on the academics, helped by a CFA, good work experience. I would say solid work experience and solid goals. Really, this is going to come down to the application, how strong the application is.
The big question that OP has here is how competitive they are for their target schools, that's M7s and T15s.
Yeah, okay. I think that it's going to come down to, I think goals is going to be really important. Specifically the short-term goal. OP is talking about transitioning to an infrastructure-focused investment bank. Now, we know from experience that investment banks are particularly aware of the visa limitations of international applicants.
Yeah.
So I would be really wary of moving to New York, to an investment bank in New York, to get investment banking experience at the finance hub of the world. As a Nigerian applicant, you're going to struggle potentially with that. I would prefer, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it could be a struggle, and it might be a pink flag for adcoms. I would be much more keen to include an investment banking goal in Nigeria. So, for example, Citibank, Standard Chartered are both international brands that are well known for their Africa presence and have offices in Lagos. Um, those for me would be more appropriate and more strategically beneficial for a short-term goal. And I think if OP can play that narrative right, can really dig out an impactful story in the real estate, finance, asset-backed security kind of world, link that to an investment banking role in Nigeria where he perhaps already has connections, and a long-term goal that is establishing an infrastructure financing firm of his own, then I think OP could be in the running for an M7. But it's going to be tough, particularly given that GRE. And so I would say T15 really should be OP's bread and butter. And I think is it really in a strong position for those T15 programs, probably a small scholarship available as well.
So are you saying they should apply broadly across schools and see what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Apply to both, but T15 is really where I would anticipate OP having the most success. That GRE is simply, it's like 8 or so points below the average of the M7s. That's quite a big hurdle for them to clear. So I would say T15 is the bread and butter. Apply to a few M7s for sure, because I think you'd regret it if you didn't. But I think that's where I see OP ending up.
Okay, I think that answers OP's question quite nicely. Shall we move on to profile 2?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. MBA in my 30s. I'm in my early 30s. They're based in the US West Coast. Recently left a big tech role. So work experience wise, they've got 7 years, starting with a 2-year internship, major think tank, a year at a fintech startup, a year at a VAR, which is a value added reseller. And now they're 3 years in big tech. Also moonlit as a business intelligence researcher for a major sports teams, but that apparently doesn't pay very well. So what they want to do after their MBA is strategy. They love strategy. Of all their favorite work projects, they really like the consultancy related projects they had been given. So that's why they want to pivot into consulting at a top firm and focus more on corporate strategy. So now the question is whether an MBA is a key step. So let's just go through some quick stats as well. We've got, which school should I consider given my background? BA Pol Science from a top European uni, 3.3 GPA, graduated at 26 though, as they escaped an abusive relationship. So let's get into the profile review.
Okay, so high-level profile review. Look, that 3.3 GPA is pretty weak. It sounds like that is the result or linked to this abusive relationship. I think that, but on the other hand, the fact that it's a top European uni is going to have credibility. We don't know how high. It's difficult to know without knowing which uni it is, but it sounds pretty positive. I think from a professional standpoint, look, really varied. 7 years of work experience in think tank, fintech, value-added reseller, big tech. That's going to be that could be where that could be a bit of a pink flag for the adcom. Why? Because it looks like maybe you don't really know what you want to do and really haven't found your passion yet. On the other hand, it does sound like OP has actually found their passion, and so they can possibly offset this concern with a good set of essays. There are 2 passions from what I see. One is sports. OP says it doesn't pay well and is therefore disregarding it. That might be a mistake. And then the other one is strategy work, which has sort of is leading towards consulting. Now, as I think about those 2 goals, I really prefer the sports narrative, Mal, on this, because so many people are saying, I want to go into consulting. And of them, loads of them are saying, I really like strategy. So I think for the application itself, don't worry about the pay. focus on the sports narrative. That can be different, that can be unique. And it sounds like OP has got some really interesting experience there in terms of this moonlighting work. So that's from a professional standpoint. It could be strong, but it will depend a lot on the narrative that OP chooses. From a extracurriculars perspective, I don't see much except for this moonlighting, but I think, as I say, that might lead into the narrative, so it could actually be quite strong. In terms of demographics, all I have here is that OP is early 30s. Let's say that means 33, which perhaps means by the time of application in round 2 of this year could mean 35 or 6 at matriculation. That might be a concern. OP is an older applicant for sure. In terms of goals, yeah, it comes down to this idea of sports versus consulting. I think sports is way more interesting. And I think if OP can focus on that, that could be a good goal. It could work really, really nicely. And then the other thing I think of as I see this profile is that it's going to be this is a big contender for an optional essay. And so we'll talk about what that optional essay can look like. But basically, that's going to be something that's going to be really make or break whether this is a strong sort of M7T15 application or lower.
Okay. OP also has a few pointed questions. So
Okay.
one is, they're, like you said, they have a passion for strategy. So the current network is currently just tech and PE or VC. So would an MBA be actually a key step in making that transition towards strategy?
Yeah. So whichever goal OP chooses, whether it's strategy via consulting route or the sports story, an MBA is going to provide that network for sure, particularly a top MBA. I would argue that a good, solid T15, anything above sort of T15 ranking is going to provide good networking opportunities in both of those sectors. And so, yes, I think as OP is looking to hopefully get into their groove and find a sector that they're going to stay with, then building a network in that sector via an MBA is definitely an option. Yeah, it's one of the key reasons people in general pursue MBAs.
OP is, like you said, on the older side as well. They've also got a complicated background with the academics. What schools should they consider given this background?
Yeah. Assuming we go down the consulting route, then there's a handful of really classic consulting schools. Darden has the case method, which aligns well with consulting. Yale put like 40+% of this cohort into consulting. Those would work really well. From a sports side, there are schools that have really good sports teams and really good sports presences. Duke jumps to mind. So that's how I would be thinking about the schools. Those are the ones that jump out for me. On the other hand, I would also consider there's another consideration here, which is due to the OP's age, early 30s. It might be that European international programs are more who tend to have higher work experiences in their cohort. They might be appropriate as well. And from a consulting perspective, the one that jumps to mind is INSEAD. They have a high proportion of consulting, particularly MBB graduates that go into that sector. So from a school perspective, those are schools that jump to mind.
Okay. OP is also a little less math inclined. So they've not taken the GRE or the GMAT yet. Which one should they prioritize?
Traditionally, people that are less math inclined do better in the GRE. It's not a hard and fast rule of thumb, but it is something that we have seen over time. Also, I recently interviewed one of our in-house GMAT GRE tutors, Mario, and I asked him this exact question, and he said that the GRE has, because it's an older test, there's more material that you can use to study from. The tutors have got more experience in identifying classic issues that test takers have, etc. And that in his experience, people at the moment are faring better on the GRE than they are on the GMAT. People that are taking both are tending to do better on the GRE. So for all of those reasons, my default here, or my gut says, focus on the GRE first, but it's not a hard and fast rule.
Okay. I think we've covered all of OP's questions. Do you want to move on to the next profile then, Sam?
Yeah, I'd like to just touch on that optional essay a little bit because I mentioned that before. I think OP's story is one that if he or she is not careful, it could come through as a little bit of a sort of, yeah, making excuses almost, right? Because we've got this low GPA that it's explained by an abusive relationship. Fine. We've got all these different roles in all these different sectors that are probably explained individually one way or another, but they do still present a bit of a pink flag. So as I was saying before, the optional essay is going to be really important for OP. And basically what I want to say is, OP, please don't leave this stuff to chance, right? In your optional essay, some schools give you up to 500 words to write an optional essay. I want to see a solid first paragraph about why your GPA is only 3.3. Explain the abusive relationship, point to specific classes on your transcript where you scored poorly and how that overlaps with episodes of the relationship. And also explain this variation in professional experience. Try and identify a common theme here. So if you say, for example, that you were going off in search of roles that could impact a cause that you cared about, and all of these different roles provided a different facet to that, maybe the fintech startup provided a financial aspect to that particular cause. The big tech provided a technical, a coding perspective, but that they all align with a certain macro theme. That would be really nice to explain in the optional essay. So try and explain to the reader why you have been bouncing around between these roles without sounding like you're making excuses. Try and make it sound like you did something deliberately and that you've, or at least sound positive, that you've benefited from all of them in a different way. So don't leave these two aspects to chance. Write about them in the optional essay. I hope that's clear. OP, if you've got any more questions, get in touch. I'd be happy to follow up in more detail and talk about how consulting could look. For you, it does sound like a case where a consultant might be quite beneficial. Okay, with that, should we move on to the next profile?
Yes, we shall.
All right, let's do it.
Profile 3 is what are my chances at getting scholarships through a 695 GMAT for T58 schools? So they've just got their GMAT 1 day ago, 695, 97th percentile. They're from Nepal and they have a non-traditional background. By that, they mean they've got a civil engineering degree, 2 years of engineering work experience, and now they work at Teach for Nepal, which is an education nonprofit. So they work at the intersection of education and social impact. Leadership and volunteering, quite a few things there. Head of extracurricular activities at my school, extensive volunteer work, lifetime member of Samarpan Yuva Sanjal, which is a youth committee. Rotaractor, selected for the US Youth Council program as well. Post MBA, consulting. And they've got 5 years of work ex. Given their score, unique geography, and this social impact engineering mixed background, what are their chances?
Okay. High level overview first then. Academic, right. I mean, it's very clear. It's a case of strong GMAT, weak GPA. I think the GPA, is it mentioned in the application or is it in the comments? We don't know the GPA. Okay, so we don't know the GPA in this case. So that in it on its own is a bit of a flag for me. I'm like, oh, if we don't know the GPA, how are we going to do a profile evaluation? It does make up a big part of the application strength, particularly from an academic standpoint. Okay, so we have half of the information we need. Strong GMAT, but we don't know the GPA. From a professional standpoint, I think this Teach for Nepal is really quite an interesting piece of work experience, backed by hard, solid engineering work as well. That will be a standout. I think that will be a beneficial aspect of OP's application. The extracurriculars, heaps of education-related extracurriculars in there as well. Lots of stories, I'm thinking, for leadership stories, leadership essays, and there's probably there's an education theme that could definitely come up here, combining the work experience and the extracurriculars, which begs the question, why the hell is OP putting consulting as their post-MBA goal? Because there's no explanation, and because so many people just put consulting as a knee-jerk reaction, my suspicion is that OP hasn't thought about that at all. And that I think that is probably that's a weakness in the application as I see it, but luckily it can change before OP actually applies. We'll talk about what might be better. From a demographic perspective, Nepal is relatively underrepresented You've just got to be careful to differentiate. Obviously, being within the sort of Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi region, that is an overrepresented bucket. Nepal is underrepresented within that. So
Yeah.
I would say it's really important for OP to make that distinction somehow in the application and to not end up getting bucketed in with Indian applicants. Teach for Nepal obviously helps do that. So what it comes down to then is goals. Without consulting as a goal, I think OP could have a strong profile here if the GPA is solid. If the GPA is weak and the goal is consulting, the profile is pretty underwhelming. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, speaking of the GPA being missing, OP also wants to know, given all of their scores in geography and their goals, what are their realistic chances for merit scholarships at T15 US programs, and which schools might be the most?
Yeah. Look, I hate it, and schools hate it when applicants are so focused on getting a full ride scholarship. I mean, the
Right.
level of entitlement that screams is really not pleasant reading, especially, yeah, I mean, it's annoying for me. Adcoms really hate this. Um, yeah, I understand that an MBA is expensive, but your peers are, willing to take on a bit of a loan to pay for it. They're backing themselves to pay this back and have an impact. And somebody coming in and asking for a full ride and basically wanting a free MBA, it's a little bit of a poke in the eye to business schools. So make sure that you do not take that angle with your when you're speaking to business schools and you're at an event. The last thing that they want to hear is, what are my chances at a full ride scholarship? And they're like, what? So you want a full ride, taking money from the pot that we're going to give to every other person in this room? How does that sound? Obviously, it's not a good look. So that said, I also just don't think OP really is a full ride scholarship candidate, to be really blunt. Without knowing the GPA, I'm going to make the assumption that it is a roughly average GPA, 3.6 out of 4 equivalent. With that, the GMAT is strong, but it's not that strong. The work experience is okay, but it's not that strong. The goals, if it's consulting, are rubbish. Why would they give the full ride to somebody, to this candidate, over somebody who's maybe, got a standout GPA from a standout school and is targeting a real impactful role, maybe, setting up their own impact consulting firm, which is going to genuinely change the world? That person's going to get the full ride, not this person.
Okay. So with their scores, should they retake the GMAT?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. Look, 97th percentile is strong. And if the GPA is solid, then it's, definitely don't retake that. Focus on the rest of your application. But if you think you've left something on the table, for example, you were scoring 7.35 in your practice tests and your GPA is weak, below, say, a 3.3 or thereabouts, then I would retake the GMAT, because it's going to be your key academic foundation in your application. And that then would also give you the opportunity to say in your optional essay, hey, look, I know my GPA is weak, but look over here at my GMAT. That's really strong, and hopefully that offsets my GPA, and I think that's a better representation of my academic abilities. That adds additional weight to the importance of the GMAT, and therefore I would say take it again if there is if there is opportunity. I noticed here that OP is saying I could probably increase my GMAT score by 10 to 20 points. If the GPA is weak, I do think that's worth doing.
Worth the effort. That's also something they say. It doesn't look like they want to take it again. So,
yeah, fair. Look, I would say take it again if your GPA is weak. If your GPA is strong, don't.
Yeah. Okay. A lot hinging on that GPA then.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we've covered
comments.
everything.
It looks like the comments agree with me, right? Good profile, but it's not a full ride. Yeah. Nobody asking about the GPA, given how much of a big factor it is. That shows the quality of the comments sometimes. Okay, next profile.
Next profile. Okay, we've got someone with stats right in the title: 331 GRE, 3.1 GPA, M7 or T15 with scholarships.
Hmm.
Demographic age 29, married with one kid, African American. GRE
Okay.
330, like I said before, the split is 166, verbal 165 point. GPA 3.1. In the comments, they've mentioned which degree they're doing, and that's business administration in their undergrad. The first 5 semesters above a 3.4 GPA. Also started working part-time, so this is optional essay territory right now. Started working part-time to help offset some family financial issues, so that played a part in the low GPA. This
Okay.
is yeah, in the comments. Work experience, 7 years of experience. Current role, manager at a Big Four, previously at a global IT strategy firm. Career goal, post MBA role in private equity value creation or corporate strategy within a F500. You want to apply in fall 2027. Yeah, what do you think overall about this profile?
Yeah, okay. From an academic standpoint first, look, 331 GRE is very, very strong. You know, really, really outstanding. I think that puts OP in a really good spot. The 3.1 GPA, not so much. It does sound like OP has got some very good reasoning for that they can explain in the optional essay, but that is going to be, you know, negative for the school stats. Certainly M7s are going to look at that and think, ugh. From a professional standpoint, 7 years of experience is more than the average of about, you know, 4.5, typically average, particularly if that's 7 years now and will be more like 9 at matriculation. So that could also be a bit of a concern. But OP as a manager does have managerial experience, which I always say is a really big factor to offset having more work experience. You can get
Yeah.
into a top MBA program with more than the average work experience if you've got strong managerial experience. And it looks like OP probably does. From an extracurricular perspective, not much to go by on here. I would say that maybe OP's just, you know, hasn't mentioned it yet, but if OP has anything that is relating to, you know, the financial struggles that they went through during undergrad, something related to being African American, perhaps, if there is extracurriculars that align with that sort of underrepresented, underprivileged theme, then there might be some really strong extracurriculars in there. We just don't know from the post. African American is a very underrepresented group in MBA programs and will definitely be a positive for OP. Now, goals. There are two named. One of them is private equity. One of them is corporate strategy. I much prefer the corporate strategy route, and we can talk about these goals in detail. But yeah, basically, we know that private equity is quite nepotistic, and corporate strategy is a much more sort of classic post-MBA role to get into that is going to give the AdCom a little bit more reassurance that, you know, OP can get into that role. So overall, a strong profile. The key glitch is this GPA, but I think that can be offset. So I think at a high level, I think T15 and M7 programs are on the cards, particularly the T15 programs where a scholarship, particularly a scholarship targeted at, for example, African Americans, I do think is on the cards.
Yeah. Just to think about more specifically M7s and T15s, is M7 realistic or are they better suited to T15s given the scholarship potential?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say, look, when I'm working with clients who are in this position, when sort of if you're on the cusp a little bit, throw the application at the M7s, right? If you're unsure, basically anyone on Reddit who's asking, am I M7, am I T15? If you are like a solid T15 profile, then you are also almost by definition a potential for an M7. I think this is a great example. I think OP should be aiming for M7. I think what's going to probably end up happening is with a really solid application, OP will get admits to T15, maybe with some scholarship money, let's say low 5 figures, like a 20 or 30K scholarship, might get an admit to an M7, but without the scholarship. And then OP is in a difficult position having to decide. And I can't make that judgment for OP. Most people end up taking a big loan and focusing and going the M7 route in that position. But I think basically, if you don't try, you won't know. And I think OP definitely has the GRE and the background and the experience to justify an application to M7.
And that'll help them maximize their, admission chances and also the scholarship opportunities.
Yeah, enough applications, probably round 2 at this stage to be able to really hammer out the, the 7 applications that are needed to really maximize chances. You're not going to be able to do that. It's the 15th of August, 2025, as we record. Deadlines are in about 3 weeks. Realistically, if OP wants to maximize their scholarship chances, they need to be maximizing the number of schools they apply to at the same time so that they can potentially negotiate scholarships. You're not going to be able to apply to 7 schools really well in 3 weeks. So assuming around 2 applications on the cards, then scholarships are critical. Of course, full 27. You're right. You're absolutely right. So that would be a full 26 intake, which is like a year away. So that's fine.
That gives them enough time to apply broadly?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. OP's next question would be, for those who got into M7s or T15s with a lower GPA, what specifically worked in your essays or recommendations to offset it?
Yeah, look, a lot of this comes down to luck. What do I mean by that? Look, if schools have got, in a given year or even a given round, schools have got loads and loads of candidates with high GPAs and low GREs, for example, and they're thinking, yeah, damn, we need to bring in some candidates that have got high GREs, and we don't mind if they've got a low GPA because our average is that way, then they might look positively in any given round. There's no real way of knowing whether that is the case. And again, that comes back to apply broadly and just hope that one of them has, or several of them have, the right skew of current candidates, of current applicants that suit OP. And similarly, if they don't have, for example, many African Americans applying in a given year for whatever reason, then OP's profile will be relatively stronger in that application round. Again, there's no way of knowing. That's just a roll of the dice. So again, apply to lots of schools and hope that in the round that you're applying, one of the schools doesn't have enough African-American applicants, and then OP might stand out. So yeah, in terms of specific advice, apply to plenty of schools. 1, cover that GPA in your optional essays. Don't just say, I didn't work very hard, I partied, right? Tell the story of, and that's as a general point to everybody, but to OP specifically, tell the story of your financial struggles that you had during undergrad and how you had to start work, etc. Point to the deteriorating GPA as evidence of that. And point to the high GRE as evidence that you can do the academics. There's also this question about doing extra coursework. That might also be an option as well, particularly if the courses that OP struggled with during that, I think you said Bachelor's of Business Administration, right?
Yeah.
If the courses that OP struggled with were the quant courses, then, and that's really evident on the transcript, then extra quant coursework like MBA math might be exactly what the doctor orders to offset that GPA. The fact that OP is even raising this MBA math question makes me think that might be part of the challenge. So yeah, the short answer is it probably will benefit you, OP, to take that MBA math, especially if you're applying in full 27 and you have that extra year to play with.
Yeah, OP was in the comments. OP says they were considering MBA math given its flexibility, but they'd go for HBS core if it's truly beneficial as well.
HBS core could help as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered all of OP's questions. Are we ready to proceed to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So, profile review, please. Over to you.
Long-time lurker. Hello.
Hello, long-time lurker. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm looking to apply to MBAs for round 2, and this is at HSW, Booth, and Yale. Can I get a realistic overview of my stats? Stats, BSc Economics, study abroad in East Asia. They studied at a UK Russell Group, so UK university. 2:1, no specific GPA, but a 2:1 overall score. GRE 30. Work experience 5 years in analytics, product, and strategy. Started in product analytics, moved to an UK e-commerce unicorn. Currently working as a strategy and analytics director at a very well-known publisher. Think the New York Times, think Forbes. I've had 3 promotions in 3 years. Really, really good growth. I've started my own team at age 24 and grown it to a 10+ people team. Extra info, demographics, East Asian origin, born in the UK, first-gen immigrant, first-gen college goer, low socio-economic background, also LGBT. ECs, some ECs mentioned. I see outside leadership awards and listings. I also see a volunteering at a data for good charity. Please be kind. Right.
Okay, we can be kind. Look,
Yeah.
Mal, I love this profile. I really do.
Mhm.
Let's go from an academic standpoint first. A mid 2-1 means, I believe, about 65 or so percent. I would loosely translate that to about, maybe you'll correct me on this, but like a 3.4-ish GPA thereabouts, a little bit below average for the M7s, but solid. Russell Group is it's like the kind of the tier below. Would you say like the tier below Ivy in the US? It's that sort of next tier down, second tier. So overall, okay academics from a from undergrad perspective. Do we have a GMAT score yet?
330 GRE.
330 GRE, yes, you're right. So a solid GRE score. 330, I like to say this is equivalent to about a 730 on the old test, on the old GMAT test, which is equivalent to bang on the average of the M7s. So, really solid.
Yeah.
From a work experience perspective, there's a couple of things I really like here. One, publishing is an unrepresented category or industry in MBA world. There are not that many applying to business school. And so that works to your advantage. And particularly if your brand is one that people have heard of, which, New York Times and Forbes, they have. So that could be a really strong professional angle for OP. 3 promotions in 3 years is also outstanding. And the leadership responsibility that you've been given at a young age is also outstanding. So I think OP's strengths, academics are okay, solid, but the professional experience is really where OP stands out. Now, East Asian origin born in the UK is basically halfway between two groups. The UK group, which is very underrepresented, and East Asian, which is very overrepresented. So somewhere in the middle, not quite neutral in that regard, more or less, let's say neutral in that regard, but where OP becomes an underrepresented applicant is first gen for immigrant, first gen to go to uni, low socioeconomic background, and LGBT. All of those will strengthen OP's profile just in terms of bringing diverse perspectives to the cohort. Volunteering, all we know is this data for good, but I reckon there probably are some really good stories there, particularly if OP's career narrative uses that data angle, and I suspect it probably will, given the product analytics and data science background in work as well. So a really, really nice professional background. And goals aren't mentioned, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think, they've mentioned goals anywhere.
And a lot of really interesting goals that we can talk about there. So I think OP's got a very, very strong profile, a lot to work with. So yeah, don't need to ask to be kind, OP. I think you're in a good spot.
So given this profile, what do you think is the kind of narrative that OP should be going with for the application?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. It's the key question, I think, at this point for this applicant. And I actually quite like that they haven't mentioned the goals because, and they're leaving it open because it's there's something to make of it. There's something to mold here. I'm imagining the idea of using data, right? This data theme keeps coming up, data science in the work and data extracurriculars, something like using data to drive change in a sector that OP cares about. There are lots of sectors that OP could genuinely care about. The low socioeconomic background, I want to use data to help people in my small underprivileged town. It could be to help LGBT people. It could be to help first gens. There could be loads of different groups that OP could be targeting and looking to help using data. So and then publishing fits into that as well, because obviously there's data and there's publishing and there's analytics and it all fits into a nice theme there. So I'm imagining a career narrative that looks like this. So think about this as the 500-word essay, for example, for Columbia Essay 1, right? And then the career goals essay that a lot of people work with. So opening with a challenge that OP faced, maybe as an LGBT person, as maybe as a first gen, like some sort of challenge that OP encountered, followed by the moment when OP realized the potential of data to use for data to do good. So, for example, a particularly impactful project that OP was working with in one of these in this current role. So I saw the impact that data can make on a certain demographic. My mission is now to do that at scale, right? And so maybe the short-term goal is to join a data analytics firm in strategy, or as a leader, as a manager, for example, at that firm. And then the long-term goal could maybe be to establish my own publication or my own data analytics consultancy, something that shows a bit of entrepreneurial gumption there. For that, I need an MBA, leadership classes, right? I've already developed my leadership style, but it's really been quite, learn as you go with this team. And I need formal leadership training. It could be like I've got some data analytics experience, but I want to build on that in data analytics classes. Maybe there's a media club, like I want to take up a leadership role in the media club because of this publication background. There'll be a lot of people in the media club who have got, who maybe worked at Netflix or on sort of TV. Not so many of them will be in publishing, and therefore that's a new perspective that you can contribute to that club. And so by going through that story from when you discovered the issue to how you're going to tackle the issue and your short-term, your long-term goal, and why you need an MBA for that, that is sort of how I see the narrative taking shape. And yeah, I think OP with that narrative would be in a really, really good position.
Do you think the narrative is good enough for Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, the M7s? What are the chances there?
Like I think that GPA might be a little bit of an issue for HSW. In the East Asian demographic, whether that's East Asian in Dubai, East Asian in the US, in the UK, they do tend to have high GPAs. And so that's going to be the key question mark. Are Harvard going to be willing to lower their GPA average? Well, actually, they're not going to be considering it into their data points because it's not a US GPA. It's a 2.1. So that helps a little bit. But still, I think there's going to be question marks from an academic standpoint. Look, I think roll the dice. I think OP's earned with that GRE and that kind of professional background. OP's got the right to try HSW, but I wouldn't, if I was to make a bet on this, I would say Booth and Yale are where OP is going to get admits and have success.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've covered all of our profiles today.
Okay, excellent. On that one, I would like to just finish off by saying, OP, if you're watching, and hopefully you are, you've got a classic profile where building a narrative is going to be so crucial for your application chances. Do feel free to get in touch to talk about that detail, that narrative in more detail. I think there's a lot we can do there. Okay, should we talk about next profile then?
Yes, we shall.
Or bonus
round. Okay, now this is a dilemma that OP is having. Dream role versus dream city. Recent M7 grad starting consulting, non-MBB consulting next month in their dream city. Let's call it City A. City A is where their wife works. They would love to stay here. The twist is they're also interviewing for their dream role in the dream industry. This was their exact, they wanted to do post MBA. Now it's within reach, but the trade-off is City A. Option one, currently, they'd stay in the city. The comp is 250K per year. They would not disrupt their wife's job or life, pay off their debt, and no moving costs. But
so relatively, that's the conservative option, basically.
That's the conservative option, but they're not really passionate about consulting, and they're unlikely to pivot to PM later. Option two, their dream role. Now, this is to be a PM in a tech-adjacent, rapidly growing Series B startup. Different city, a high cost of living city. They would get less pay. The pros is that this is exactly the role in the industry that they wanted, and they really love the mission here. This is very mission-driven. Cons, moving costs. They need a second car. Wife has to uproot life and job. Will be 3 months without salary. No friends, no family in the new city, and the industry is basically non-existent in City A, and it'll be difficult to move back when they go back to City A. So this is they're wrestling with this dilemma. What do you think?
It's obviously a really personal choice, so there's no sort of right or wrong answer here. But I'll throw in my thoughts for what it's worth. Look, I've moved countries and cities like 4 or maybe more, 5 times. And every time I did that, I didn't know anybody, any of the places I went to. And every time I did that, I've made new friends and found new people to hang out with. And it's made me I don't regret it at all. So I think there's a real positive to moving, and this idea that OP is like treating the move as a negative because they don't know anyone. I don't really align with that. I think you make friends if you have with the right attitude. The difference though is that I did it when I was single and sort of complete without any anchors. OP's got a family, and that is obviously a massively different position. But I understand from the comments, Mal, that OP's wife is really quite open to the idea, quite open to doing something new, quite excited about the opportunity, and so it doesn't sound like the sort of anchor, as I said before, is actually really going to be holding OP back. It sounds like his wife is really willing to make the move. So the kind of the flip side of this is, if you are being interviewed now for this other role, there's a question mark. Like, that role might still be there in 4 or 5 years' time. Stay, in which case the option could be to suck it up for a couple more years in the current city where you're paying off an extra 50 grand of debt a year, get that debt paid down, and hopefully that dream role is still there for you in a few years' time. Obviously, a bit of a gamble on that. The other factor that I was thinking about here, and it doesn't come up in that much detail, is it will also depend on here. OP is saying that one of the cons of moving is that his wife will likely be 3 months without salary in the new place. This is important. I mean, that's making the assumption that that OP's wife is gonna be able to get a new job in the new location within 3 months. In today's job market, that is absolutely not a given. So I'm a little bit wary about that from an assumption, as an assumption to make. If OP's wife's company has an office in the destination, that would be different, right? That would be a really smooth move without the job hunting. But this 3 months could easily be 6 months or 9 months, or even can't find the job I want, and then you're in a difficult situation. But I would say that overall, the reason why OP went to do an MBA was to pivot into this dream industry, in this dream role.
Yeah.
And I think, fast forward 20 years' time, if OP doesn't take this opportunity for the reasons listed, he'll regret it. I really think he will. I think he'll look back, and if we get really dark about this, he might subconsciously blame his family, blame his wife for not being able to make this move, for holding him back when he had this opportunity that was really, really exciting. And that's a nightmare. You don't want to be in that position of regret. That would be horrible. You'd have that be eating away at OP. So I think net, you did the OP, you did the MBA to break into this industry, and the opportunities there, and your wife's supportive. I think you got to go for it.
I think OP said wife is supportive, and then she knew that MBA would be temporary. But the biggest thing that's annoying at them is that she'd lose the community that she's built in the city.
Yeah, so, like I say, I think with the right attitude, that community can come back. And not only, if you spend a year building up a new group of friends, a new community, you then have networks in multiple cities, and you never know when that'll be useful. I like to think that if I ever went back to Hong Kong, London, Amsterdam, Brussels, there are people I can stay with who will put me up in those places that I lived in, I'd enjoy hanging out with. It's much nicer than having to stay in a hotel, and it's a great life network to have. So that's my perspective on it. Again, it's personal, but that's what I see. Let me throw this back at you, Mal. What would you do?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I think I'd stay in the city for a couple of years and then pursue my passions in a while.
Pay down the debt first, and then pursue the passion.
Money's too good. The money's too good in option A.
That's fair. Okay, awesome. I think that's that's everything I can add on this. The 50 something comments. It's amazing. There's so many people getting stuck in.
People
And the
really want
comments, as always, on Reddit become quite just descending into absolute chaos. It's quite fun.
And so many people split halfway, option one and option two. There isn't like a clear, this is what you should go for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is an insane post. Clearly, option one is better. And then other people saying clearly the other way around. It's obviously quite a divisive one.
They're like, you went to your MBA for option two, so
maybe talk to your wife, not the internet.
Reddit, right?
Welcome to Reddit. All right,
Yeah.
Awesome. Mal, thank you very, very much again for setting up today's roast and finding all these interesting profiles. If you've been watching today and you've enjoyed the session, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you've been watching this and we've roasted your profile, feel free to get in touch if you're looking at hiring an admissions consultant. Myself and the team are available for round 2 applications. And yeah, we'd love to take a look at your profile. Thanks a lot, Mal. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Sam. See you next week.
See ya. Bye.